Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Luke Homen. He is a bankruptcy attorney in Oklahoma City in the US, and he helps hundreds of people each year to get out of debt. And now he can discharge student loans. Recently helped a client discharge over $100,000 in student loan debt. Welcome to the show, Luke.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form, Luke. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit. A lot of students will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll be talking about breaking free from student debt. We'll learn all about this. But before that, let's learn a bit about you, about your journey, your background, so that people know who they are listening to.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Luke. I'm an attorney in Oklahoma. I've been in Oklahoma for about 10 years. Before that, I'm originally from California, and I was an attorney there. I moved to Oklahoma. Now I'm an attorney here, and I help people file for bankruptcy. So we just help people get out of debt, people who are struggling with credit cards, medical bills, often caused by a job loss, medical, just usually something bad happens in your life and you need financial help. And so people turn to me.
Absolutely, absolutely, Luke. So, for the common person, a lot of people do not know about legal terms, about bankruptcy, and all that. So, for a general person, if somebody says, "Listen, you have gone bankrupt," it can mean a very negative connotation. That's what it is in this part of the world, and
Sure,
perhaps in
yeah.
different part. But in business purposes, we come to hear about Chapter 11 and all that stuff. But from a common person's perspective, how should we look at bankruptcy? How should a student look at bankruptcy, as a negative thing or as an opportunity? Help us understand from
Yeah.
that point of view.
It's an opportunity. I like to think of it as a fresh start. Bankruptcy is a chance. There's negativity, sure. To some level, filing for bankruptcy means that life didn't work out the way that you wanted it to, right? Nobody grows up saying, I want to file for bankruptcy when I get older. Uh, but bankruptcy gives you a chance to start over. It gives you a chance to say, okay, things happened that weren't great. I got all this debt, or I had this business failure, or I lost my job, or my spouse and I got divorced, and we have this massive financial problem now. And so filing bankruptcy allows you to kind of clean your financial slate and say, okay, I'm going to wipe out all that debt. Now, you might not get to keep everything, right? Like if you had 3 cars or 2 houses or some mineral rights or some investments, you might lose those as part of the bankruptcy process. So by a fresh start, it's not what you want to aspire when you're a kid. It's not what you want for your life. But when life isn't going the way you wanted it to, bankruptcy allows you to turn things around. And that could be a business, like you mentioned with the Chapter 11. Sometimes businesses need a Chapter 11 to restructure their debts and get profitable. And for individuals, bankruptcy is similar. It's a way to escape credit card debts or medical bills, just everyday regular life. Here in Oklahoma, you have to have a car. It's an area of the country we don't have a lot of public transportation. Everything's very spread out. Well, cars are expensive, and if you start missing car payments, you get in real financial trouble. So bankruptcy can help you with that too.
Right, right. In terms of student, uh, they have taken a loan from whatever institution it is, and uh, they have decided, that this loan will help them in their studies.
Right.
Later on, when they'll be gainfully employed, earn, and out of that, they will repay the debt.
Well,
What is the problem there? What
that's the
hassle
goal.
comes in between?
That's the goal, but that's not always how it turns out, right? So for me, I went to law school, I graduated, I became an attorney. I have the ability to pay back my student loans. But what about a classmate who couldn't make it through law school and they failed out? Well, if they failed out after 2 years of law school, or they never passed the bar exam to become an attorney, and now they have all that student debt and they're working at McDonald's, you're not going to be able to repay all of those student loan debts when your career didn't go the way you wanted to. So we can eliminate student loans through bankruptcy now. It's a specialized process, but again, it's that idea of this isn't what I wanted, right? I wanted to be an architect. I wanted to be, a successful podcaster, but it didn't turn out that way. And so now I've got this crippling amount of debt and nothing to show for it.
Okay, okay. So in that case, it looks quite reasonable. But should students look at it, as an opportunity to get rid of themselves, even if they have the ability or capability to repay those loans, or should they, because this is a protection, this is something provided by the law of the land. How
Yeah,
should they look at it? What are the ethical aspects? I know it is difficult to
sure.
sometimes look at the ethical part, but if you look at from a tax point of view, tax
Yeah,
evasion and tax avoidance. One is a legal thing, one is a
right.
not legal thing. But so, how should we look at bankruptcy? How should a student look at this bankruptcy protection for their student loan?
Well, let me hit that tax point real quick. One of the things that's really interesting about a bankruptcy discharge is debts that are discharged through bankruptcy can't be taxed as income. Outside of bankruptcy, if somebody forgives a debt, that debt cancellation can be taxed as imputed income. You get sent a 1099-C form, and now it's as if you earned that money and you have to pay taxes on it. But when you file bankruptcy, those debts are not taxable. So a bankruptcy discharge debt is a lot more powerful from a tax perspective than from a forgiveness approach. Now, to come to your student question, when you're discharging a student loan through bankruptcy, it's a specialized process. We have to file an extra lawsuit against the Department of Education, and you have to establish three things. And the first one you've got to establish is good faith. So you have to show that you've been trying to pay these student loans and that you've taken the ethical approach. If you just graduate, you're about to get a major awesome job and you file bankruptcy, you're not going to meet that good faith element. That's one of those three things that we've got to establish in the student loan discharge. Number one, we've got good faith. We've got a current inability to pay your student loans because right now you don't have a job. But the third thing we've got to establish is a future inability to pay. So if you've got the degree, you've got the prospects, and you look like you're going to have the opportunity for a high paying job in the future, you're not actually going to qualify for that student loan discharge. And additionally, you're not going to meet that good faith requirement. So it really is important to be looking at it from this ethical perspective, because if you're not doing this for the right reasons, it's not going to work.
Okay, okay. So there are checks and balances. Are there
Yeah.
really checks and balances in this? Somebody will say, I don't have a job, and in 3 months' time after this bankruptcy protection, you go and get a job. You'll say it is divine providence. I did not. I just applied at many places. I was not
Yeah.
getting anywhere. Now suddenly luck is on my
Yeah.
side. I've gotten
Right.
into this place.
So there isn't a set time period that you have to wait after getting the loans. If you've had the loans in repayment for at least 10 years, that looks really good. I wouldn't try this until you're at least 5 years out of school, because if it's been 5 years and you've been trying to get a job for 5 years and it still hasn't worked, then it's not just a luck thing. It's probably a forever thing, right? If it's been 3 months, you just haven't tried hard enough.
Okay, okay, Luke. Uh, in terms of a student loan, why is what laws have changed? Because from being from outside the U.S., I only get reports out in the newspapers or televisions or in newsletters wherever I can. It looked like the government was helping these students, and to help them repay the loan, or maybe some foreclosure or forego those
Yeah.
loans. Well, was that not enough? Why should one come to bankruptcy part? I want to understand.
Yeah.
Was that not enough, or is it that this is the best avenue for
Yeah.
others?
So it's really complicated and the laws keep changing. And one of the things that's hard to understand is the president of the United States decided to pass, we call it an executive action, executive order. He didn't have the support of Congress, but he wrote this executive order that says, I hereby give every American $10,000 of student loan relief. All right, well, that went up to our Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, no, Mr. President, you don't have the ability to do that. That's a major national policy decision. You need Congress. You can't just do that by yourself. And so the president attempted to essentially give every American $10,000, and the Supreme Court said, no, that's not the right approach. But one of the things that's much better about bankruptcy is it is an individual approach. It's not just every American gets free money. It's if you are somebody who needs this financial help and you qualify for the bankruptcy and you go through the court system and you really show that this is something that qualifies for you, you're taking a more person by person approach and not just free money for everyone, which was not found to be legal. So
Right.
it's really hard to follow, and that's really why you need to talk to an attorney to keep up with this stuff, because it is changing all the time. And the president tried to pass a repayment program, called it SAVE, and it was going to be better repayment terms than the way it used to be. Well, that also went up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, no, you also don't have the power to do that. So that got struck down. So it's one of these areas where there's a lot of movement, a lot of changes in the news, and not everything's going to turn out to be valid that the president's trying to do. If the president really wants something to happen at a broad national level, he needs to include Congress. And that way you've got Congress and the president working together, and then our court system is going to say, okay, you took the right approach, now we can move forward. But the problem is Congress doesn't want to do it. It's a very polarizing issue because some people want student loan relief for everybody and others say, no, why should a doctor, why should a successful businessman get student loan relief? Because they don't need it. So it's pretty controversial when you're trying to do it at a national broad level. But I personally think if you're doing it on a case-by-case individual level, that shouldn't be controversial at all.
Right, right. So if you exercise this bankruptcy protection for your student loan, are there any benefits that you lose out on as a US citizen? Does that work that way?
Okay, so if you file for bankruptcy, there's a couple things that you miss out on. Number one, you can't turn around and file another Chapter 7 bankruptcy for 8 years. So there's a time limit. Number two, another thing that you miss out on is you can't use a government-backed mortgage for 2 or 3 years. So that's something that you miss out on. Here in the US, the government has a lot of programs for federally backed mortgages for buying houses. We've got a VA program, there's a FHA, there's a Fannie Mae, a Freddie Mac. These are all government-backed mortgage instruments to help people buy houses. Well, when you file bankruptcy, you sort of get placed on timeout. You can't get one of those government-backed mortgages for 2 or 3 years. So that is something that you miss out on. But you don't lose the ability to vote or lose the ability to get a gun or something like that just because you filed bankruptcy.
Right, right. So who is a fit case for this whole bankruptcy thing? Somebody who does not have a job, or some, as you said, even in that Congress, the bill did not pass because it was for everyone, even for those people who could afford to. So why can't those people say, we are earning already so much, we will not require this particular, or the Congress itself can make those changes in that bill and say, listen, we will make these changes, let these things only go to people who really need it, like it is in the bankruptcy provision. Why is it so difficult for others? It is that just lobby everywhere?
Well, there's certainly a lobbying factor. The student loan companies have billions and billions of dollars at stake, and they're very powerful. Um, so I don't think that they would want a broad-based approach. Um, when you file for bankruptcy, you have to fill out this 70-page bankruptcy petition, right? We look at your income, your expenses, your financial history, your assets, and 70 pages of questions for your finances to make sure that this person really is appropriately in a bankruptcy. So it doesn't have to be that they have no job, but if they lost their job, or if they're in a low-paying job, or they just don't earn that much money compared to other Americans. So I mentioned McDonald's earlier. They're just an easy person to pick on because McDonald's doesn't pay their workers very much money. Uh, if you work at McDonald's and you're not a manager, almost certainly you're going to qualify for bankruptcy because you're probably being paid minimum wage or something close to it. And minimum wage is not enough to live on if you're an adult and trying to support a family. So if you have that kind of income level, you're probably a good fit for bankruptcy if you have a whole bunch of debts.
Right. And what about the attorney fees? Is it too much for this, taking help in bankruptcy filing, or is it within your reasonable limits? Because you don't have the money, that's why you are filing for bankruptcy.
Right.
Or can individuals do it themselves?
It is possible to do it yourself. I wouldn't recommend it. There are lots of pitfalls, lots of ways that things could go wrong. When you file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, you can't dismiss it. So once you file it, you can't change your mind and say, oh, I didn't understand. I didn't know what was going to happen. It's too late, right? So you really want to get some good legal counsel. And really, bankruptcy attorneys are not that expensive compared to just about any other type of attorney. I think what you'll find is when you compare filing a bankruptcy and getting an attorney to paying your debts or doing a debt repayment or a debt consolidation or a debt restructuring, that the amount of money that you would pay an attorney is just tiny by comparison. So it's a worthwhile investment. Get some good legal counsel. Look at your individual situation and decide, is it the right time? Does this make sense for me?
Right, Luke. And what about students who are from outside, non-US citizens who are from outside? Is there a provision they can avail loans from US banks? And can they also get this whole bankruptcy protection? I am not sure about if they can avail those student loans.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure of getting student loans when you're not from the US. I believe you can. You don't have to be a US citizen to file bankruptcy, though. You don't actually even have to physically be in the US to file bankruptcy. I've actually done a bankruptcy for somebody in the Philippines. You have to have a reason to file in the United States, though. So one common example is this is the principal location of your assets. So the person still had a house and a truck in the United States. They'd moved to the Philippines. I was still able to file their bankruptcy. You could also file for bankruptcy for somebody who's, like a legal resident in the United States. They work here. Maybe they went to school here. We could do a bankruptcy for them too. So if that answers your question.
Yes. In the long run, if you file for bankruptcy, who actually loses the money? Is it the banks, or is it the U.S. Government which loses money? How does it happen? Because in India we have got nationalized banks also, as well as private banks.
Yeah. So our banks are private, but a lot of debts are guaranteed by the federal government. So like those mortgages we talked about earlier, some of those are federally backed, federally insured. So if the bank takes a loss on that mortgage, they turn around and pass that loan off to the government, and the government reimburses them for that loss. Similar with the student loans are generally done as a public student loan, meaning that they are through the Department of Education and they're federally backed. Now, it's possible to get private student loans. Those are much more difficult to discharge in bankruptcy. It can be done, but because they're not federally backed, it's a different process. But I would say easily 95% of student loans in America are through the Department of Education, through the government. So it'd be the government taking the loss on that. Now, if it was just the credit card companies are earning trillions of dollars, right? I always tell my clients, you need the money a lot more than that big bank does, right? The bank is going to be just fine. They can get their tax write-off, they can get a business loss. And so, yes, on the one hand, the bank takes a loss. On the other hand, that's why they're allowed to charge 20% interest, because there is a bankruptcy pressure valve release for people who need it.
Right, right. So business bankruptcies, Chapter 11. For student loans and every other loan, is it Chapter 7? And or any other chapter is there? Only, or it comes only under Chapter 7 itself?
Okay, so generally speaking, I would do the student loans through a Chapter 7. It's possible to do them in a Chapter 13. A Chapter 13 is a bankruptcy for somebody who earns more money. So you do generally a 5-year repayment program on the debts, but if there's somebody who's earning a lot of money and they've made it through a 5-year repayment, they may not be a good candidate for that same student loan relief. And then a business isn't going to be holding any student loans, so it doesn't make sense to do a Chapter 11 and then student loans. So usually it's a Chapter 7.
Right. And is student loan law in different states? Is it different, or is it almost the same across the U.S.?
So student loan law is going to be virtually the same in every part of the country. Same with bankruptcy. You know, there's always local twists on it. There's going to be local procedures. There's going to be local ways of filing the paperwork, or in bankruptcy, there's a local change on what property you get to keep as part of the bankruptcy. But in general, bankruptcy laws and student loan laws are more or less the same throughout the country.
Right. And if it is a case of, say, married people, one earns a lot, another does not, or they show that they are not earning. Will they count as couple income, or is it only an individual?
Yeah. So when you file for bankruptcy, you can, and you're married, you can either file individually, or you can file as a husband and wife spouse, or a spouse and a spouse. But the bankruptcy court takes a look at the income of even the non-filing spouse. So let's say that one spouse files, the other doesn't. The court would still look and see, okay, your spouse is a high earner. You don't belong here. You should have your spouse pay for your debts. And so that's how Congress set that up. Now, on the other hand, if you're separated, you know, you're still legally married, but you haven't seen your wife in 6 years, we don't need to provide income records for that non-filing spouse when they're separated.
Okay, okay. I think there is a lot to learn about these chapters, and you have explained a lot, but a lot of things needs to be learned about it from you. So for those people who want to learn all these chapters from you and more about you, about how this all work, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Okay, my website is convenientbankruptcy.com. If you go to the website, we've got our phone number, we've got an ability to book an appointment, you can chat with somebody on the website. Just go to convenientbankruptcy.com, and that'll have everything you need to get started.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.